Welcome to Civil War Digital Digest. I'm Will. We're in the Henderson Wilder Library and Archive here at Upper Iowa University. We say thanks to them for the space to shoot this episode. Collector Mike Huston has said we should meet here for some other episodes and one more to talk about today. As we get started today, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends at Battlefields and Bourbon Podcast. It's a wonderful podcast originating out of the Shenandoah Valley, and yep, it's those two things. They'll talk to you about a bourbon, open it, taste it, and then go on to a wonderful conversation about Civil War history. You should check their podcast out. Mike, thanks for coming in, and who are we going to talk about today?
And today we're going to talk about a different soldier, Will.
How does Staton connect with the pieces we have here today?
So all the items that are here belong to John W. Staton. These were items that we assume he probably had at the time when he mustered out from the American Civil War.
And you mentioned he's 20th Iowa. Give us a capsule before we go to the man. Let's give some context for him. Talk to me a little bit about the 20th.
Yes, the 20th Iowa is probably best known for their engagement at the Battle of Prairie Grove in December of 1862. But they also were involved in one of the last major assaults in the American Civil War in the Battle of Fort Blakely.
Talk to me about what this collection is.
Well, this collection came to me in my full-time job. I sell seed corn. And a customer of mine had contacted me and said, hey, I have a landlord that has this gun. And he doesn't know a lot about it, but it's pretty interesting. And I told him he should talk to you. And so I went and met with that gentleman and was amazed to find what it was that he had. Really, the unique aspect about this grouping is that they are all connected to one soldier, John W. Staton. He has carved his initials into some of the items, the back of the cartridge box. He's also carved his initials there in the scabbard of the bayonet. But one other unique characteristic is all of these items are marked with a 48, which is where he was at on the muster, and also with a G, which is the company that he served in the 20th Iowa Infantry.
Well, okay, for folks who aren't maybe as deep into the military culture of the Civil War, we know the company letter. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about that number. What do you mean where he was?
Your muster roll would have went in alphabetical order. So for men that were in his particular company, he was the 48th man on that muster roll.
And so we see those stamped into these weapons.
That's correct. And regulations said that you were supposed to have those items marked, but in my experience, it's pretty rare to actually find them all together in one place or to find them with these particular markings.
Well, let's start with the man because there's a story here. Tell me about Mr. Staton.
One of the reasons why I really enjoy collecting items from the Civil War is because it really brings a personal connection to the actual soldier. And those soldiers that I take the most interest in are maybe those men who didn't have someone else to tell their story for them. And John W. Staton, he served in the American Civil War, came back home to his farm near Davenport, Iowa, and actually more near Muscatine, Iowa, and farmed there after the war. He was never married. He never had any kids. He farmed with his brother there. His brother never married and no kids. So they did not have any descendants. When John W. Staton passed away, these items were left to his brother. And then in turn, when his brother passed away, these items were just in an estate. The brother was a gentleman who was kind of known as a hermit, very eccentric as he was described, someone who wasn't really out there in the public eye a whole lot. So there was a lot of wonder, in the community about him. So when his brother passed away, everyone attended the auction. And one of the things that was highlighted in that auction was this particular collection.
Fantastic. Do we know about John? Have you been able to find, was he part of a GAR post or anything after the war?
No, there's very little record of him after the war. And that, just adds to some of the allure about, I guess, the collection for me is there's still a lot left to learn, about John W. Staton. And that's why I'm proud to be the caretaker of this collection so that I can do more research.
Fantastic. Well, as a caretaker, you've gone over this research. Why don't you walk me through and talk to me about the different pieces?
Yep. So the first thing that we have here is his rifle. This is a Model 1861 Springfield that's dated 1864, made by Providence Tool Company. And it has the original sling. This is something that you don't run into very often. And we often debate in the reenacting world about whether we should or should not have slings, but really neat to see the sling on this particular weapon. and it's still complete with the tompion there in the end of the barrel as well.
Fantastic. And being a 64 stamp, this would not have been a Prairie Grove, but might have been with him at Fort Blakely.
Absolutely. These are later war issued items, and very possible that they could very well be the items that he carried at Fort Blakely.
Okay. Do we know about the maker of the weapon?
The manufacturer of this particular weapon was Providence Tool Company.
So a contractor, not one of the arsenals.
Correct.
Okay. And the leather work?
Yep. So the leathers here, we have the original belt, which I've removed the buckle from just to kind of keep it in a little bit better shape. We have his waist belt buckle. On the back of that particular buckle, it's stamped with a G. And he served in Company G of the 20th Iowa Infantry. So that buckle is marked. Kind of a unique item here is an original container that held caps. There were 100 caps for this rifle that are contained here in this little box. And then, of course, we have our cap pouch. And on the cap pouch, on the inside of the flap here, it's marked with the G and also with the 48. So again, 48, that's who John W. Staton was, and he was in Company G.
And the thing that strikes me as I look as we go across the collection is these stamps. Looks like it's the same stamp that struck every one of these.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They definitely look very similar.
Okay, so the centerpiece of the leathers is, of course, the cartridge box. What do we pull out of this?
Yeah, the neat thing about the cartridge box is when I acquired that box and I pulled the tins out, there were actually a few unfired rounds that were in there, as well as one paper round, which is really neat. And then as we flip that box open, it's marked in the similar manner as the cap pouch as well.
I also see some almost embossing on the cartridge box there.
That's right. This is a later war model cartridge box that did not have the plate on it. It just would have had the U.S. embossed on the front.
Okay, and talk to me about the wear that we see on the back from the sling.
Yeah, so it appears to us that it's possible John W. Staton may have worn this cartridge box on his belt and also maybe on the sling. We can see wear on the loops on the back from not only a sling, but also they're kind of stretched out as if the weight of that belt, kind of spread out the loops.
Because a lot of people don't think about the weight of a full cartridge box with 40 rounds of lead rounds.
That's right. And there are some accounts talking about soldiers later in the war, especially when they're on garrison duty or when they're on guard duty, where maybe they were a little more lax and maybe they were just wearing that cartridge box on the belt itself.
Okay, and the last leather piece here?
Yep, so we have the sling, and then of course we have the scabbard for the bayonet, which is marked and goes with this particular rifle. John actually marked that bayonet scabbard with his initials, JWS, John W. Staton.
And I notice, as well as the embossing in the cartridge box, we see the 7 rivet variant, which is known to be a later variant of bayonet scabbard as well.
Yep, that's correct. I mean, these are most likely the very last, accoutrements that he was issued, before being mustered out.
Which means he's able to purchase them and take them home as the government draws down.
That's right.
Okay. Well, we've got a grouping. We've got a man who's a bit of an enigma, a bit of a mystery. Where does this collection leave you?
It leaves me with wanting, I guess, wanting to learn more. One of the very first things that I did after I acquired this collection from the previous caretaker was I went to the cemetery where John W. Staton was buried to just kind of take these items back and kind of reunite them, with the man. But I feel like as a collector, one of the most important things that we need to do is obviously preserve the items and preserve the history. And part of that is learning more about them and being able to share those stories. And so I'm really appreciative of having the opportunity to come here today and to share the story. And as I've learned with collecting and with research is you're always going to learn something new. So I'm sure I'm going to learn more about this gentleman, as time goes on.
Fantastic. Well, you talk about preserving and caring for, and neither of us are experts in conservation, and we don't have a ton of, hey, do this, do that.
Yeah.
This collection, you've told me, has a really good do not do this if you collect. Why don't we talk about what's happened previously to these leathers and what should be avoided?
Yeah, one of the previous owners, the gentleman who purchased the collection in the 1960s, so about 100 years after, John W. Staton would have had it, he felt like he was doing the best job he could in preserving it, and he had great intentions. But one of the things that he used was need's foot oil. And what we've learned is that need's foot oil can actually kind of break down that leather. So as we look at these items, the outside of the leather items is kind of worn and kind of breaking apart where it's been broken down. But as we flip the cartridge box open, as an example, the leather is really pristine on the inside. So where it didn't have as much attention from the needs foot oil, it looks really good. So I think it's just important to do a lot of research and make sure that you know what the best way is to preserve these items for future generations.
So being clear, conservation-wise, we're not going to tell people do this, but we're going to say with Civil War leathers, do not use neat's foot oil on originals.
100%.
All right, fantastic. Well, Mike, thanks for sharing the little bit of a primer there, and thanks for sharing John with us. We appreciate you as a caretaker bringing and allowing more people to see him.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Will.
Well, this is a great way to look at a collection, to meet a Civil War veteran, even though we don't know what his face looks like. Through his collection, Mike has shared that with us. You've also gotten a little idea, if you're starting to think about collecting Civil War leatherwork, what not to do. We hope you've enjoyed this. We want to say thanks to our patrons, the CWDD Coffee Grinders, for financial support, making it possible for us to travel. We'll see you next time.